So for today's player profile, we're going to be discussing Gary Payton II, who is a veteran guard for the Warriors. Obviously, the last couple seasons, his availability has been an issue. I think he was a very critical piece to that 2022 championship run. But since then, he has regressed in some ways. Injuries have played a part in that. But I think ultimately he does provide value on the court. Last season, he was still a positive. Unfortunately, injuries held him back yet again. But I do think he can still provide a burst of energy and some positive value when he's on the court going into the season. So looking at his breakdown, last year he only played 44 games for us. And that's a problem because that's half the season for a player we depend so heavily on at the point of attack defensively. Only averaged 15 and a half minutes a game in a down season, 5.5 points, 56% from the field, 36% from three, 2.5 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal. The biggest thing with GP2 is he's not going to be a high volume player. He's not going to score a lot. He's not going to, have a lot of assists. He's not going to fill the box score necessarily. He's going to be a player that fills in the gaps and provides energy on the defensive end. And his greatest strength is his high-level point of attack defense. He's guarded players like Devin Booker, John Morant, Jaylen Brown in some very big matchups over the few years that we've had him on the roster. The most elite perimeter scorers are primarily his matchups, and he's held up against them as well as anyone in the NBA. So he is a very, very quality defender from that standpoint. Now, would I consider him elite? I would not anymore. I still believe he is a high level defender, but for him to be elite, I think last season he had experienced too much regression in a few areas for me to consider him from that standpoint. So I think he can get back to that, but obviously um, he struggled last season to stay consistent, and even on the defensive end against matchups like Kyrie, right, struggled against him at times and was kind of found himself lost or got easily beat off the dribble. And I think some of that's just compounded with the fact he's dealt with injuries over the years. He's gotten a bit older. He's 31 now. So the combination of those, factors, I think, have led to him, struggling the way he has, especially last season. But he is still one of the premier defenders in the NBA that you want guarding the opposing team's best perimeter players. Because even with his decline, I still believe he provides a lot of value on that end, and he was a positive for a reason, right? I remember in the playing game, for example, we didn't have him available against the Kings. And Andrew Wiggins had a lot of that load at the point of attack placed on him, that burden. Well, you go rewind earlier in the season in November when we played the Kings in the in-season tournament, and GP2 completely shut down Malik Monk when they matched up. And we were up by 20 before GP got hurt and then was forced to leave the game. So I think the biggest thing with GP2 is as long as he can, stay on the court, his durability isn't an issue. His value will be immeasurable because he can post some of the most significant net rating and impact metrics that we've seen for that reason. So I think the reality is it's a combination of individual regression, inconsistent minutes, and also just a lot of players emerging. Pods last season had a really good year. Obviously, JK played a lot more in the front court. So some of these, opportunities kind of were reduced for GP. Didn't have as much time out there on the court. And he also was just hurt with the calf injury, the hamstring injury at the end of the season. So that started to pile up. But like I said, outside of Andrew Wiggins and maybe DeAnthony Melton, Gary Payton the second is probably the third best point of attack defender on this team still. and you can depend on him on most nights to do a very good job on the best perimeter players in the NBA. And part of why he's so great at what he does defensively is that he's positionally sound. So he moves his feet. He doesn't play defense necessarily with his hands. He slides his feet laterally. He makes sure to stay in front of his man. At times, beats his man to their spot. Right? Has really, really high level instincts. Can anticipate the pass off the ball, and he does a really good job of reading the lanes and being able to see the play before it develops, understanding what is going on, what set is being ran, and the tendencies and patterns individual players also have to be able to exploit maybe a weakness or a predictive uh, approach. Maybe certain players like to go left, or maybe players like to pull up on, off of a screen. And so GP2 is, understands the scouting report well, and I think his discipline and textbook ability to guard, and at a very young age, obviously learning under his father, Gary Payton Sr., who is, one of the greatest defenders at the point guard position ever, that must have helped. So understanding that, there's a reason he's as good of a defender as he is, and his ability to anticipate um, and beat his man to his spot, I think, are the greatest attributes he has on that end. So there's no, it's no accident that GP2 is one of the best defenders in the league, and we've seen it over the past few years against some quick, athletic guards like John Morant and Jaylen Brown, and then more shifty and skilled guards like Devin Booker. He can, defend any range of player for that reason. Now, he is a really, really good play finisher as well. Someone that can play within the read and react offense in the dunker spot. His ability to, understand his positioning on the offensive end. He's not someone that's going to take high volume threes or attempt a lot of shots. He's not a shot creator, but he's someone that can finish plays, convert off of the advantages that are created by Steph Curry. So, for example, as a lob threat on the, in the dunker spot, or being able to read and react in accordance with what play that the Warriors are running, right? Whether it's diving to the rim or slipping from, slipping the screen. These are things that GP2 does really well, and it's something that he's built over the past few years, because coming in, he already showed some flashes of being able to play off the ball. But I think as we've seen the seasons pass, he's added more and more to his game. It's become more second nature, more fluid, and he's been more comfortable playing within the flow of the motion system that Steve Kerr likes to run. So ultimately, most of GP2's shot attempts, they come from very close range, within a few feet from the basket, and he understands how to time his cuts, how to put himself in a position to beat his man when they're maybe ball watching or they're not necessarily connected. So off ball cutting is an attribute of his, that's a skill set of his that is very underrated and very, very valuable for us. We've seen it in the playoffs and even in the regular season, a very efficient way to score. And having someone like that that's dynamic, that is constantly moving and reading the defense, is always important, because a set defense is one that, is dangerous, because basically they're able to anticipate the play, be able to read what's going on, and cut it off. But if players are constantly moving individually and then also moving the basketball, it causes the defense to shift, rotate, and move along with them. So GP2's ability to cut off the ball is invaluable, and I still think that's something we can take advantage of even as he gets older. Specifically on the baseline, right? The baseline cuts, when defenders fall asleep, he can catch them off guard and take advantage of that. And another thing that he has to his advantage, his physical tools, right? It's no secret that GP2 has really, really unique athleticism for his position and his size, lateral quickness, and really good hands. Somebody that can, strip his matchup on a drive, right? So being able to stay in front of his man, use that positional soundness, those fundamentals, understanding, how to beat him to their spot, and then maybe you can't get to their release point or you're able to strip that shot before they're able to get it off. GP2's instincts and his anticipatory uh, abilities give him that advantage versus some of these elite guards. And I think that's an underrated aspect of his game is he has a very unique superpower, and that is being able to completely disrupt an offensive player. And one of the reasons specifically why he can do such a good job is because he has such a positive wingspan, right? So Gary Payton II's wingspan is around 6'7", 6'8". So a 6'7", 6'8" wingspan for a 6'2" guard is incredibly uh, advantageous when it comes to defending 6'3", 6'4" offensive players that, maybe have a 6'6" or 6'7" wingspan. He can match up really well with them, get to that release point and to that shot pocket and really bother them. And that's something that I've noticed specifically against Devin Booker. I've noticed him do it against Jaylen Brown, where he can really get to that release point and contest a shot, and it bothers them. So great hands, right? Being able to use his length and his tools physically to bother the opposing offensive player, and using his lateral quickness to beat them to their spot, but also, rotate on defense, right? Off the ball, peel switch, all of these concepts, it's much more easy to execute them to a T when you have physical tools that allow you to. So that's another aspect of his game that I think is underrated. Now, over the years, as he's physically regressed and at times declined in certain areas, I still think his experience and his understanding of defensive fundamentals and concepts still reign true. And even while his physical tools may not be as significant or may not be um, as much of a factor as he gets older, I still think he's able to counteract certain players in terms of their moves, their athleticism, their shiftiness through know-how. And know-how is such an incredibly valuable aspect to defense because understanding those tendencies and those patterns and the predictive nature of certain players also gives you an advantage. And so that'll be the balance that GP has to sort of manage as he gets older is he may not have the same physical tools in terms of his quickness or his burst or his verticality, but he'll always have length and he'll always be able to understand how to angle himself to, give himself advantageous positioning against his matchup. Now, another thing that he does, which is incredibly unique when you look at the fact that he's 6'2", and most players who spark the fast break are usually wings, right? So you look at players like Giannis, who's a wing slash big. You look at a player like Kawhi or LeBron, players of that sort. They're just, downhill players that can, power through the defense and use their physical attributes to take advantage of that downhill. Well, GP2, even though he's a little undersized, he's super fast and he's his north to south, end to end speed and presence is very apparent. So in 2022, when we brought in GP2, he was able to be disruptive and then convert on the defensive end offensive opportunities on the fast break. And so what he did was he would spark the fast break and create momentum shifting plays throughout the duration of the game. And that would create runs for us, like 11-2 runs or 16-5 runs or even 7-0 runs, right? And these runs would give us, it would build leads. It would extend these leads. And that's what makes him such a valuable spark plug and such a valuable energy boost for us off the bench is that he can spark a fast break with his defensive abilities, and then that'll shift the momentum throughout the course of the game, which will break it open and then extend the lead for us. So he's not a player that's going to necessarily be a net neutral and hold serve and, keep things at pace. He's someone that's going to actually extend the lead, break it open, and provide us, a boost in terms of a positive player that can really shift the the energy of a game. And I think that was really apparent in 2022. As the years have gone on, I think that's an area where he's declined at, and that's for various reasons. We'll get into that. But I think that still reigns true because we've seen him, even last season, at times provide that spark. And I think that is incredibly valuable. You need to have players that are able to, uh, you know, kind of throw a little bit of a curveball uh, within the flow of the game, right? If you have predictable players, you can't game plan for someone that's as disruptive as GP2, that can, change the flow of a game the way he does, right? You can't prepare for that before a game. That's something that you have to react to, and so that's something it's a secret weapon when you think about it, right? It's a very, very um, you know unique weapon that we have that a lot of other teams maybe not maybe are not able to pull out. Another thing that I will say is over the past few years, he's built up his ability to shoot the ball. I think he's turned into a very capable shooter. Shot at around 36.4% last season from three, which is around league average, if not slightly better. So he's shown the ability to actually shoot the ball when he's open. He's not afraid to let it fly. He doesn't hesitate. Defenses, they'll leave him open from time to time, especially in the corners. For his career, he shoots 38.8% from those corners. So again, his ability to shoot the ball is also something that people have underrated. And especially in the playoffs, like his ability to hit those corner threes when teams decide to sell out on Steph or sell out on Clay, it's something that he's worked on over the years as a counter, and it has converted really well. So GP2, very, very good player, can play within the flow of the offense, and he's a system fit. I think his skill set fits right in terms of his ability to shoot, his ability to finish at the basket, play off the ball, and ultimately his point of attack defense is his greatest skill set. His ability to guard the elite perimeter players in the NBA, and just his understanding of fundamental defensive technique and concepts is something that is, irreplaceable. Now, again, more strengths that you can point to is the fact that he's a 16-game player. He's someone that is going to be a playoff riser. He's going to improve under those conditions with greater physicality, with greater, half court possession to possession, situational awareness, understanding how to close games, and what position to be in, right? Playing small ball lineups as well at the four. For example, against the Lakers in 2023, his ability to, and that game four in particular, and game five, slide in as a starter and essentially completely changed the entire momentum of that series in the Tide, where he was able to exploit Anthony Davis's lack of speed and essentially find those crevices and those openings within the defense to take advantage as a cutter and also on the fast break. So GP2's speed and his ability to, dive at the rim and his ability to set ghost screens or slip screens, I think that makes him very unique because he plays like a front court player, even though he has the positional size of a backcourt player. And so that is something that's fundamentally different, and just, very, very separate from the traditional guards that we see in the NBA at 6'2", 6'3". Well, GP2 can play the 4 or the 3. And, if you want to lean small ball, he's able to take advantage of slower centers. His verticality, his athleticism off the bounce is something that he can also use to his advantage too. And so that quickness, right, is paired with athleticism, and I think that gives him an advantage inherently against these bigger players in the front court. And again, we've seen him close lineups, right? We've seen him close games against the Nuggets in Game 5 in 2022. We've seen him do it against the Celtics in 2022 in Game 5 as well. And so we've seen Gary Payton II really provide us with a lot of value in understanding the system and understanding how to play fast and how to play bigger than he actually is. And he is built. His skill set is built for the playoffs. His uniqueness is something that we can take advantage of on that stage. And again, just to sort of reiterate, like his roll man scoring, his ability to roll to the basket, right? When you set a pick and roll and a ball screen, right, he can slip, he can run a ghost screen, and run DHOs. So GP2's versatility goes even beyond diving to the rim. His ability to read and react within the flow of the offense and understand how to dive properly, make decisions in the short roll, and play make, right, be a connector, and understand spacing, understand how to take advantage of the lanes that are going to be open when that Steph creates. All of those things cannot be understated, and he's picked those up over the years as he's had more experience with the Warriors, as he's played next to Steph and Clay and Draymond more often under Steve Kerr. I think he's picked up on the nuances of the system and understanding how to counter the defense, keep them on their toes and off balance. Slip screening is such an underrated area of his game because what it does is it forces the big or the front court defender to step out to the perimeter and or a little bit higher than they would prefer. And if he slips the screen, then that's an immediate advantage that he has downhill, where he can either look to score and finish above the rim, or he can look to pass and find a cutter or an open shooter. So GP2 also, people got to remember, he came in as a point guard. He was drafted he actually went undrafted, but he was brought in by the Wizards in that first season of his, and he was thought of as a point guard. So he's actually evolved his game to fit a more modern style and to fit into, how we know teams might defend, ball screens, and taking advantage of his quickness, his athleticism, and ways that he can, use that to his advantage. And him being a vertical threat, understanding that, in the half court, you can run, that tic-tac-toe to the lob in the baseline, a dunker spot, um, sort of being a player that in transition as well. Just we've seen over the years Steph throw lobs. We've seen other players find GP for above the rim finishes, and that's something that he does really well. His athleticism is a tool. It's an asset. And in transition, there's a reason he's one of the best in the league at converting in those opportunities. It's because his gifts provide him that ability. So I think that being a vertical threat is such an underrated aspect of basketball because a lot of people see a lot of three-point shooting. They see players take high volume attempts from three and that kind of thing. But I think with GP2, what makes him unique is his ability to not only play effectively in the half court, but also understand his positioning in transition and pushing the pace. Now, again, the intangibles that he has are also something that people cannot underrate, right? He's active on the boards. He dives for loose balls. He's able to, hustle, deflections. These are things that you can't necessarily dismiss because they change the flow of the game. They provide energy, and it's good leadership by example because you begin to see other players like Steph become more active, and Wiggins he kind of increases his defensive intensity. And I think what GP2 does is he's very contagious, right? He's very active. And the fact that, like, the energy that he provides is very contagious, and the intensity is something that a lot of players pick up on. It raises the level of activity of the overall team, and I think that's something that we cannot underrate either. You want to have players that cause deflections, disrupt, get other teams within out of the flow of their offense. That is the key to an elite defense, and I think he provides that still. Some of the weaknesses that we've seen though over the past couple of years that have been noticeable is that first of all he's an undersized front court player, right? So he plays primarily the 3-4. He's more of like a wing forward. On the Warriors, he's not used as a spacer or at the 2. He doesn't initiate offense at the 1. So understanding that at 6'2", 195, he's not necessarily going to be jumping over 7-footers all the time. And there's times where maybe he has to go to a floater or he has to go to a little push shot. And those shots may not be as effective because his touch is a little bit questionable. 195 pounds, he can't really bully ball his way to the basket, can't really, power down the middle and get to the rim with force. He's not someone that's going to play like that. He's going to be more finesse around the basket if he's confronted with a bigger player. And so he doesn't necessarily finish effectively over length for that reason. So even though against the Lakers he found some success against Anthony Davis in that game 4 and 5, typically speaking, if you watch him, and as he's gotten older and lost that speed and quickness, he's struggled a little bit more, especially the last season and a half, to really punish those bigs that may be slower footed, but they have length. And that length can bother him from time to time. And then just in general, his offensive limitations. He's not necessarily a floor spacer or a shot creator. He's not someone that's going to put the ball on the floor and break his man down. He's not going to, drive and kick and make plays for his teammates necessarily. He doesn't attack closeouts very well. It's not something he does a lot of, and it's not something he does very well. So because he struggles in these areas, he's kind of relegated to dunker spot, cutting off the ball, or the spot up threes. He doesn't really put the ball on the floor and leverage his handle to create an advantage against the defense. He sort of is more of a play finisher than a shot creator, and that's his role. It's a weakness because, again, defenses can take advantage of that. They can exploit that by cheating off of him, by playing off of his non-threat ability to sort of attack that closeout. But again, that's something that we've had to manage over the years, and pairing the right pieces and the right skill sets and lineups around him to make sure that it doesn't become an issue if teams play off of him. And that's why GP2 primarily plays next to Steph, right? GP2's minutes mostly come next to Steph Curry because Steph is the best shot creator and spacer we have on the team. And you want to have a player like that next to a play finisher like GP2. Getting stops and scoring off those is contagious, raises the overall energy 100%. And so he's more of a transition player. He's someone that's going to provide energy. He's not going to be like a half-court, engine of an offense, not even a weapon necessarily. He's going to be just more of a finisher. And he even provides some, second chance points, put back dunks, tap out rebounds. That is the type of value he provides. He's not someone that's going to beat you with his skill. He's going to beat you with his energy, and he's going to beat you with his hustle. But he is a weapon in terms of his overall impact, but less so in terms of his skill set, in terms of breaking the defense down with his wiggle or with his handle or with his shot, right? He's going to be someone that fills in the gaps. And another issue that we've, kind of come to grips with over the years is his durability concerns. He has been injury prone the last few seasons in particular, dealt with a calf strain, a hamstring issue, and a core muscle surgery over the past few years that have all kind of derailed the consistency of his minutes, his playing time, his opportunity, and his games played, right? His availability. And I think the durability issues have increased as seasons have gone on. Last season, he only played 44 games, and he's played a total of 66 games over the last 2 years. So there's obvious concern for GP2's, injury-prone nature, and the fact that he's someone that really hasn't been available for us over the past couple of years. And he's, making $9 million a season, which is a significant chunk of the salary cap. We can't dismiss that either. And so that's something that we have to look at as well when we talk about how valuable is he, how much can we preserve what he provides for the playoffs, going into the playoffs, because I'm not sure, his body can hold up throughout the course of the season. His play style is one that, is a hustle, it's physical, and he's guarding players. He's playing defense. He's, sliding his feet, taking bumps, and he just plays a very physical brand of basketball that takes a toll on the body. So that's something that we have to take into consideration when it comes to prolonging his availability throughout the duration of the season. And some of that has also led to a regression in athleticism. He's no longer the same athlete he was 2 years ago. Loss of strength and vertical explosiveness, and a decline in quick twitch burst. He just doesn't have the same physical advantages that he once did, even though he still has length. His ability to beat his man to a spot is above average, and he still has vertical ability as well. none of it is as elite as it once was. I think we'll have to see what he looks like next season in terms of his health, and if he can get back to full health and his body can fully recover from the piles of injuries he's dealt with over the years, then that's something we can take into consideration. But for now, what we've seen is, he's 31 years old, he's getting older, and it doesn't look like his body is really holding up that well, given his physical brand of basketball. And on top of that, just the injuries that have piled up over the years, it's just led to a regression in his overall athleticism. And that strength we kind of saw in 2023. I think in 2024, we saw him regain some of that back. But that vertical explosiveness is just not the same. It's not quite the same. And that quick twitch burst where he's sliding his feet and has that anticipation, able to kind of rip the offensive player in front of him as the defender, and pick their pocket, beat them to their spots. Even though while that still is a valuable part to his game, it's not quite as effective as it once was. It's not quite as dominant as it once was. As far as expectations go, I think most of us expect him to have inconsistent, roles and or an inconsistent minute off the bench in terms of like his playing time. I don't think he's going to be playing, 20 plus minutes a game. His career high in minutes was around 17, 18 a night back in 2022. So he played around 18 minutes a game that season, and I think that obviously was something that, changed the course of our year, finding minutes for him and his playing time. I think next season, I don't expect his role to be as consistent. I think his minutes will be down, part of which has to do with the fact that there's a logjam at, the guard position and the front court position too. You have Wiggins, you have Draymond, you have Kuminga. Moses Moody might be even viewed as a 3 as well. So you have a lot of options at the 3-4, right? And I think in Kyle Anderson as well. So because we have those players available in those positions, I'm not sure there'll be as much opportunity for GP to play at the 3 or the 4. And obviously at the shooting guard position, we have Pods, Melton, Buddy, and obviously Steph plays at the 1, but can play some 2 as well. So GP's role, I expect to be diminished with age. I think if he's still on the roster past the deadline, they're going to just try to preserve him for the playoffs and try to carry him through the season to make sure that he's able to be available when it matters the most on that stage. But I do still expect him in the minutes he does play to have impact and to provide a lot of value as a defensive stopper. Even now with the regression that he's experienced, I still think he provides a lot of high-level defensive effort and ability, right? His technique is still elite. His boost of energy, the fact that he's disruptive and provides a lot of value on that end is something that we can still use. It was apparent last season in a lot of matchups early in the year. He was guarding SGA and De'Aaron Fox, and Devin Booker. He did a really good job last season guarding those guys and making it tough on them. And a lot of his matchup stats were favorable, and he held up really well. He's an experienced depth piece. He's a veteran. He's played in a lot of big games, in a lot of big moments, not only in the regular season but in the playoffs. So he understands what it takes to win, and he'll do what it takes to win. But his major abdominal surgery affects muscles and therefore the strength and stability of the core. Both GP2 and Wiggins suffered similar issues, hence why they weren't 100% last season. I expect them to be fully healthy next season. I agree, NTD, and I think ultimately you look at the fact that injuries typically do linger until you have a full stretch to recover fully, and being able to get that rehab and that recovery in. I think GP2's had, maybe not enough time to do that, but ultimately, I still think even with the regression that we've noticed and that we've been able to identify, his experience is invaluable. The energy he provides off the bench in swinging the tides of a game, and the fact that he's so disruptive, and that's the approach, that's his identity as a player. That will not change. And on top of that, him being a system fit, right? Playing off the ball, the ghost cuts, spotting up in the corners, handling the ball a little bit to initiate, his speed in transition as well. All of those things are incredibly valuable because they essentially add versatility to the lineups, right? When he can bring the ball up and initiate a little bit to get us into our sets, that's something that takes the burden off of certain players. Like maybe Steph can play off the ball, right? Or maybe Trace can kind of run a ball screen, and guys can move off the ball, and it frees up the offense a bit when you have players that can initiate like that. So, Kuminga doesn't need to necessarily initiate. He could be a play finisher. He can fill in where he needs to. I think having GP be able to run the offense here and there is something that is underrated because he's done it throughout the past couple of years. He's brought the ball up. He's, thrown it into the low post and then, ran a back cut or an Iverson cut to, kind of move the ball and connect these lineups. So I think his speed and transition is another thing that we can't necessarily, dismiss. That ability to convert defense into offense is wildly underrated because in today's game, with a lot of half-court explosiveness from a lot of these teams, you need to have players that are able to, not only stop their man, but also convert in transition and be effective when it comes to those opportunities. And he's a player that has done that over the years. Even again, with his physical regression, he's shown the capability of providing value from that standpoint. So I think GP will continue to do that, playing off the ball in the motion offense, understanding how to read and react. Steve Kerr has run some sets and some plays for him, and so we'll probably see more of that next year. Back screens, ghost cuts, baseline plays, getting him, freeing him up and open for easy shots and efficient looks. I think that's something that GP's done over the years, and I expect that to continue. And again, he'll fill in where he can. Right, he's not going to be a high volume scorer or a volume shooter. He's someone that's going to be primarily off the ball and going to be filling in where he can. Offensive rebounds, right? Transition opportunities, those are his strong suits. And then lastly, he's a connector. He's one of the best connectors we have on the roster. He provides lineup versatility by being able to play small ball at the 4. He gives us some speed. He gives us some burst and athleticism. Even though he's undersized, I think that provides us with some, unique aspect, both on, offensively and defensively, because he can guard at the point of attack on the defensive end, and then offensively, he can kind of run the floor, play fast, and beat his man in the half court as well when he slips screens and runs, go screens as well. So I think those are things that you got to look at as well. And then his veteran presence, right? Someone that is going to, not only connect lineups from a skill set standpoint, but from a vocal standpoint, being a leader, calling out, where the screen's coming from, understanding how to communicate on the court, putting guys in the right position. I think that's an incredibly underrated aspect of defense. And GP2 is someone that's going to communicate. He's someone that's going to be vocal, and he's going to connect lineups by utilizing his veteran experience and his tutelage to get the young guys on the same page and to make sure that as few breakdowns occur as possible. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can identify from him is that with GP2 on the court, there's very few breakdowns you can see defensively. More times than not, we're connected and we're generating stops. So my player projection for GP, I have him at around 15.8 minutes per game, and the points per game I have at around 5.6. So a slight uptick from last year. Last season he played around 15.5 minutes per game. I think he'll be a little bit higher than that. His points per game will be around 5.6, rebounds 2.8, assists about 1.3, steals 1.1, blocks 0.3. And I have him shooting around 58% from the field, 37 from 3, 61 at the line. And I think he'll be a very, very major positive. Last season, he was a plus 83 in 44 games. So I think he can be a plus 104 in around, maybe 60 games or so if he's healthy. The biggest question with GP2 is how healthy can he be? Can he be available? Can he be consistent on the court? Because when he gets consistent minutes and when he plays consistent, in terms of games played, and he gets that run, I think what we've seen is someone that can provide a lot of value, that can change the momentum of a game, that can shift the tides, that can provide defensive energy and effort that's contagious throughout the 1 through 5 out there on the court, and it's incredibly essential that we have players that have skill set like this, because maybe a game isn't going the way we want it to, and you need to have counters, you need to have options, and he's someone that can be thrown out there and be a counter and guard the opposing team's best perimeter player and provide that energy and effort on a game-to-game basis, possession-to-possession basis, because he doesn't take plays off. He's someone that's going to hustle, dive for loose balls, and connect lineups. So I think GP2's presence over the years has been valuable. It's been positive, and we're going to continue to see him, you know, be out there as long as he's a Warrior. Steve Kerr is going to play him because he does provide a spark off the bench, and that boost of energy is invaluable at the end of the day. So appreciate everybody for listening. This was the GP2 player profile breakdown, and tomorrow we'll be covering Trace. So this was the expectations I have this season are, not too high. I do think he can still provide value. We'll have to see what he does on the court leading up to the deadline. I think a lot of what he does in the early parts of the season will determine what ends up happening with him at the deadline.